Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful, unsettling, and psychologically rich myths in human history. A story of fate, blindness, pride, self-knowledge, and the one truth every ancient culture tried to warn us about. You cannot outrun your destiny. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why this ancient myth is still relevant today, what it teaches us about self-awareness and self-deception, how running from your truth leads you straight to it, the real meaning between fate and free will, and how Freud transformed this myth into one of the most controversial psychological theories ever proposed. So settle in, this is the myth of Oedipus Rex, the king who solved every riddle, but the one inside his own soul. Our story begins in the ancient city of Thebes. King Laus and Queen Jocasta, proud rulers, stand before the oracle of Delphi seeking guidance. But what they hear is not guidance, it's doom. The oracle tells King Laus, "You will have a son who will kill you and marry his mother." This is not the kind of prophecy a king can ignore. Terrified, Laus and Jocasta make a decision, a desperate, cruel, and irreversible one. When their baby is born, they drive iron pins through his ankles and order a servant to abandon him in the wilderness to die. They believe fate can be undone through brutality. But fate is patient and precise. The servant cannot bring himself to kill the child. He hands the infant to a shepherd from Corinth, who delivers the baby to the Corinthian royal family. King Polybus and Queen Merope take the boy in, name him Oedipus, meaning swollen foot, and raise him as their own son. Oedipus grows up believing he is the prince of Corinth. He grows strong, confident, proud. But rumours begin to swirl, whispers that he is not truly the king's son. Confused and shaken, Oedipus goes to the oracle of Delphi for answers, but the oracle does not reveal who he is. Instead, she gives him the same prophecy spoken years before. You are destined to kill your father and marry your mother. Oedipus is horrified. He loves the king and the queen of Corinth deeply, so he makes a decision that changes everything. He runs. He leaves Corinth to protect the parents he thinks are his. He tries to outrun destiny, and unknowingly he runs straight into it. On his journey away from Corinth, Oedipus reaches a narrow crossroads. There he encounters a small group of travellers, including an older man being carried in a chariot. The two men clash in a moment of arrogance and anger. Words escalate, ego swells, and a fight breaks out. In a furious rage, Oedipus kills the entire group. What he does not know, what no one tells him, is that the man he murdered was King Laus, his real father. The prophecy is beginning to unfurl. When Oedipus arrives at Thebes, the city is in terror. A monstrous creature, the Sphinx, blocks the gates. With the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and the face of a woman, she devours anyone who cannot answer her riddle. The riddle is simple yet profound. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? Oedipus thinks and answers, man. The Sphinx screams, hurls herself from the perch and dies. Thebes is saved, and the people reward their hero by making him king. They also offer him the widowed queen's hand in marriage. The queen's name is Jocasta, his real mother. They marry, they have children, who are both Oedipus' children and his siblings. Neither he nor Jocasta know the truth. The prophecy is now complete. Destiny has done its work quietly, methodically, and without mercy. Years later, Thebes falls under a terrible plague. To save the city, Oedipus vows to find the source of the corruption. He summons prophets, he interrogates witnesses, he questions shepherds. Piece by piece, the truth surfaces like a monster from the depth. The traveller he killed at the crossroads was King Laos. The queen he married is his mother. The prophecy he fled is the prophecy he fulfilled. When Jocasta realises the truth, she hangs herself in despair. Oedipus, in a moment of agony and self-inflicted justice, blinds himself with her brooches. He chooses physical blindness as a punishment for the moral blindness he had carried all his life. He leaves Thebes in exile, once a saviour, now a symbol of the human condition. A man who solved the riddle of the Sphinx but could not solve the riddle of himself. So now that you've heard that story, let's explore its deeper lessons, the wisdom it offers our modern lives. These themes are why the Oedipus myth is considered one of the greatest stories ever written. The Greeks believed fate was woven into the fabric of existence. But let's interpret that for modernity. Your fate doesn't have to be mystical. It can be the circumstances of your birth, your childhood patterns, your early identity, your unconscious beliefs, the psychological forces shaping you. Oedipus tried to escape his destiny, but in running from the truth, he ran directly into it. In life, the things we must avoid, the difficult conversations, the hidden truths, the wounds, the trauma, become the very things that destroy us if we refuse to face them. Avoiding the truth never prevents pain, it multiplies it. Oedipus didn't fall because of evil. He fell because of hubris, pride. He believed he could outsmart destiny, solve every problem, force the world to bend to his will. But pride is blinding, anger is blinding, denial is blinding. Each of these makes you vulnerable to the very outcomes you fear. Oedipus wasn't doomed because of the prophecy. He was doomed because he refused to question himself. The Temple of Delphi bore the famous inscription, "Know thyself." Oedipus knew everything except himself. He was brilliant, powerful, brave, but self-awareness, he lacked it entirely. This is the true tragedy. He sought knowledge but avoided self-knowledge. He searched outward but never inward. In our world today, people chase success without understanding the motivations. They solve external problems while ignoring internal wounds. They build lives based on identities that aren't truly theirs. Self-awareness isn't a luxury, it's survival. And this myth forces us into a difficult question, which we have discussed over a few podcasts recently, is do we have free will? Or are we shaped by forces beyond our control? Most philosophers believe the answer is both. We are shaped by the environment, upbringing, trauma, genetics, unconscious emotional patterns. But we are responsible for how we respond, the choices we make after we become aware, the direction we steer our lives once we know ourselves. Fate sets the stage, but free will determines how you play your role. Ancient Greek drama was meant to produce catharsis, a cleansing of emotion. Oedipus' suffering was designed to create empathy and humility in the audience, because his story is our story. We all act without knowing the full truth, judge without understanding, follow impulses that we don't fully control, discover painful truths about ourselves, hide from the parts of us we fear most. The myth reminds us to be compassionate towards ourselves and towards others. The final message is perhaps the most powerful. We cannot control everything, but we can control our response. Oedipus was struck by tragedy beyond his control, but he accepted responsibility. He didn't blame the gods, he didn't hide. He took ownership and faced the consequences. That's leadership, that's maturity, and this is what it's meant to be like as a human. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Sigmund Freud revisited this myth and saw something deeper, something psychological. He believed the myth symbolised a universal stage of childhood development, which he called the Oedipus complex. Freud proposed that around the ages between 3 and 6, young boys develop unconscious affection towards their mothers and unconscious rivalry towards their fathers, not in a literal sense, but in a symbolic, emotional and developmental way. Freud believed that the child admires the mother as the first source of comfort. The father becomes a rival for attention, and the tension must be resolved for the child to develop a healthy identity. Modern psychology doesn't take Freud's theory lightly, but it recognises the metaphor. We form internal emotional maps through our earliest relationships, and those maps shape who we become. Freud saw Oedipus not as a tragedy about fate, but as a tragedy about the unconscious mind, because like Oedipus, we act out patterns without knowing their root. We repeat cycles from childhood. We are driven by motives we don't fully see. The myth became a mirror for the deepest layers of the human psyche. Oedipus Rex is not just a story about a king. It's a story about all of us. It teaches us to confront the truth instead of fleeing it, to recognise the power of the unconscious mind, to understand how pride, anger and denial blind us, to cultivate self-awareness, to accept what we cannot control, to choose how we respond to suffering. The myth has survived for over 2,000 years because it speaks to something timeless, the journey of discovering who we really are.